Get up! Not here.
Enough!
You just lost more than your pride. You lost me.
The wedding ring lay cold on the cathedral's stone floor, not lost, abandoned. It caught the stained glass light like a tear, small, bright, impossible to ignore, yet no one moved to pick it up. Not the bridesmaids frozen near the altar, not the groomsmen suddenly studying their shoes, not even the usher at the aisle who looked like he'd forgotten what hands were for. Because in that moment, the ring wasn't jewelry, it was a verdict. Amara stood in her white gown as if the dress itself had given her a spine chin level, shoulders squared, face calm the way storms look calm before they break. A Nigerian woman with deep brown skin and steady eyes, her stillness made the cathedral feel smaller. Across from her Tund, tall, clean-cut, in a white suit tailored to look like victory, held his smile through sheer will while feeling hundreds of eyes pressing into his collar, his jaw, his hands. He stared at the ring like it had insulted him and spoke low and sharp. Pick it up. The words were meant to be private, but in a cathedral sound climbs. Amara didn't blink, didn't flinch, didn't argue. No, clean and final like a door clicking shut. For a heartbeat, no one understood what they were watching because weddings aren't built to pause. They move through music, vows, applause, and blessing. But resistance now stood at the center of the church. 10 minutes earlier, everything had been perfect. Straight aisle runner, white roses thick along the pews, choir lifting voices, guests in elegant Nigerian attire sitting with the posture people reserve for history. Then Tun's mother arrived. She entered quietly without display of wealth. Deep blue lace, simple and immaculate against dark skin, gel wrapped with careful dignity. She wasn't glamorous, but she was his mother. She sat in the front pew where tradition places mothers like pillars beside the altar and folded her hands. Tund saw her. His smile faltered like a candle touched by wind, something dark passing behind his eyes. Without cueing anyone, he stepped down from the altar, each step loud against stone, and walked toward her. Amara's bouquet lowered slightly as bridesmaids exchanged glances and then looked away. He bent close and whispered, "Get up." Not here. The meaning landed before the sentence ended. Not the front, not where you belong. She didn't argue or cry. She inhaled once and stood. The church fell into a deeper silence as she walked the aisle alone with quiet dignity, humiliation carried like a crown. At the doors framed by daylight, she turned once toward her son, toward the altar, toward the life built by unseen sacrifice. Her face stayed composed, but her eyes carried memory. Amara had seen everything. The dismissal settled into clarity. She stepped forward, took a microphone meant for celebration, and faced Tund as he returned, expecting the ceremony to continue. Her breath filled the speakers. If your mother isn't important enough to sit in the front row, then you're not important enough to stand beside me. The words landed heavy through the pews. His smile vanished. Without breaking eye contact, she slid the ring from her finger, held it briefly to the light, and let it fall. The metallic sound echoed. You just lost me. The ring rolled once and stopped. No one moved. Near the doors, Mama Tun still stood in daylight, and everyone understood this was not a breakup, but a refusal. Refusal to build a future on a man who shrinks the woman who gave him life. Refusal to call disrespect love. Tun stepped forward, but Amara turned away with certainty, lifted her gown and walked down the aisle alone. No choir, no organ, no vows, no blessing. Only the faint ring on stone as the wedding ended before a single promise was spoken. After the shock of that moment, the story doesn't move forward, it moves backward. Because if you judge Tund only by what he did in that cathedral, by the cold command and the way he tried to relocate his own mother like an inconvenience, you miss the older thing that built the man he became. Tund wasn't born cruel. He was born hungry, not just stomach hunger, but the kind that settles into a child's bones when he watches his mother stretch one meal into two, when disappointment becomes normal, when he learns the world listens differently if you wear better shoes. He grew up in Lagos on the edge of survival, where the streets were loud and money was thin. Mornings mixed prayer calls with hawkers shouting, Danfo buses coughing smoke, neighbors arguing over small things because small things were all they could control. His mother, called Mama Tund long before Tund was anybody, sold in the market. A real market, sun-heavy, air-tasting of pepper and exhaust. Every naira counted. Some days fabrics, some days vegetables, and sometimes whatever she had left at home when she didn't want people seeing struggle in her eyes. She once had a bright laugh before life taught her to save energy, but she never lost dignity. What Tund remembered most were her hands, always moving, counting, folding, tying, cutting, scrubbing, carrying. Those hands bought his uniform, paid exam fees, held him through fever, hunger, and the anger of being poor. When he was small, she pressed her palm to his cheek and said, "My son, you will not suffer like me." He believed her completely. Classmates mocked his sandals. He pretended he wasn't thirsty because he couldn't afford water. Listened to boys talk about generators and weekend trips while smiling like he belonged. In Lagos, he learned early, appearance buys time. His mother never let bitterness win. She turned it into fuel. At night, under a rechargeable lantern when electricity failed, she told him to read so his mind could travel where her body could not. Sometimes he slept on his books. Sometimes he woke to her watching him with love mixed with fear. Fear of what poverty does to good boys. University admission sounded like a miracle across the compound. She cried the quiet cry of relief, cooked jollof though it cost too much, borrowed a wrapper, smiled through pain, and told praising aunties only, "God has done it." Tund promised he would repay her, and meant it at first. But entering the world she dreamed for him changed him. His accent shifted, posture straightened, wardrobe sharpened. He worked in glass offices with air conditioning, quiet lobbies, rooms where people didn't fight to be heard. There he discovered success wasn't only money, it was belonging, and belonging had a price. People spoke about poverty without saying it, used background like a diagnosis, smiled while inspecting. "Where are you from? What does your father do? Which school before university? What area did you grow up in?" At first he answered honestly, then he edited. He learned certain neighborhoods sounded better, certain brands softened judgment. Slowly he felt something he hated, not embarrassment of being poor, but embarrassment of ever having been poor. It started small. The first time his mother visited his apartment, she carried food in a nylon bag, proud she cooked for him. Her lace was old style. She sat carefully on the sofa like it might break. He should have felt tenderness. Instead he felt exposed. Colleagues stopped by unexpectedly. Polished English, easy laughter. Each time she spoke Yoruba or Pidgin, each too local question tightened his chest. He began managing her. Don't shout, don't ask, just sit, telling himself he protected her while really protecting himself. Visits grew shorter, then rare. Not because love died, but because he loved the version of himself without her in public. He sent money, paid rent, provided food. He wasn't a monster. He was a son who believed money could replace presence. Money quieted guilt. Money was easier than humility. His life rose fast. Promotions, invitations, larger apartment, better car, new scent. Then he met Amara, poised, educated, kind without condescension, from a family calm around bills and old enough in status not to prove it loudly. She listened when he spoke about his mother and said, "A woman like that raised you?" That's strength. He felt proud, privately. But the closer he got to her world, the louder his insecurity grew. Her world had history, names, networks, people accustomed to influence. He was still climbing, and climbing meant constant evaluation. He rehearsed speech, softened his past, polished his smile. Slowly his mother became not a person but a reminder, a risk. He hated the thought but couldn't stop it. She would call and ask when he was visiting. Soon became a practiced lie. His proposal to Amara was grand and she said yes with tears. Families celebrated, cathedral booked, reception planned. Then came seating arrangements. Amara naturally placed Mama Tund in the front row. Tradition, respect. Tund felt panic. The front row meant spotlight, and he had spent years controlling what people saw. He told himself it was presentation, comfort, class, but truth was uglier. He didn't want cameras to capture the market in his past. The more he thought about it, the more he resented her for existing, for being evidence. He didn't realize how far he'd drifted until the wedding day. Because Amara had never cared about his past. She loved him for his character. She believed struggle makes a man gentler, sacrifice makes him honorable. She believed until the cathedral doors opened, until Mama Tund walked in dignified in blue lace, until Tund's smile vanished and he whispered, "Get up." Not here, until Amara saw the truth money couldn't hide. That was when everything changed, because she had never cared, not until that day. Now we see the story through the mother's eyes, not through polished cathedral cameras or society's whispers, but through the quiet place where a woman measures her worth, not by applause, but by sacrifice. Mama Tund never wanted to embarrass her son. That truth lived in her bones long before the wedding day. She spent her life making sure he would never lower his head the way she once had. Every blister on her hands, every missed meal, every dawn she rose before the sun was a prayer in action. Let my son stand tall, even if I must bend. She knew she did not belong to the world Tund now walked in. She felt it the first time she visited his office and saw the receptionist glance at her wrapper and practical sandals. The first time she attended his work event and realized the women wore lace worth more than her yearly rent. The way conversations paused when she joined, not cruelly, just unfamiliar. She did not resent it, she accepted it. A mother's pride is stronger than discomfort. When the wedding invitation arrived, thick cream paper, gold lettering, she held it gently and traced his name with her thumb. Tund Adebayo. Her boy who once ran barefoot in the compound, who hid behind her wrapper when strangers visited. She didn't think about seating or status. She thought about gratitude. The week before the wedding, she went to the market as a buyer, choosing a deep blue lace, dignified, not flashy, and paid a trusted tailor to sew it. She practiced tying her gel in the mirror until it sat proud and balanced. When neighbors asked if she was nervous, she laughed softly. "No, I am blessed." On the wedding morning she woke before dawn, not to work, but because memories wouldn't let her sleep. Tund at 5 crying over a torn uniform. At 10 promising to buy her a house. At 16 studying late while she pretended not to notice his exhaustion. She prayed over him as she always had, not for wealth, but for character. Then she dressed slowly. The cathedral felt enormous when she arrived, doors tall enough to shrink anyone. Perfume and polished wood filled the air. Guests in gel and tailored suits laughed softly between pews. For a second insecurity touched her. Was her lace too simple, her gel too traditional? Then she remembered she came not to compete but to celebrate. An usher guided her to the front pew reserved for immediate family. She hesitated. "Are you sure?" "Yes, Ma, mother of the groom." The words warmed her chest. She sat carefully, folded her hands, adjusted her gel, and looked at her son in his white suit with swelling pride. She wanted to wave but didn't, wanted to call his name but didn't. She simply sat. She did not know the front row meant status, legacy, presentation. To her it was simple. She was his mother. Where else would she sit? When Tund saw her, she noticed immediately. Mothers always do. His smile strained, jaw tight, eyes lacking the softness she remembered. A familiar ache touched her. Had she worn the wrong thing? Before she could think further, he stepped down from the altar and approached. For a hopeful moment, she thought he came to greet her, to hug her, to show pride. He leaned close. She smelled expensive, unfamiliar cologne. "Get up," he said quietly, then, "Not here." She didn't understand. Had she taken the wrong seat? Misunderstood the usher? Her mind searched for error. She felt no anger, only confusion, and beneath it shame. Had she embarrassed him already? She did not ask. She didn't want to worsen the moment. If the seat troubled him, she would move. It was only a chair. His happiness mattered. She stood slowly, composed, adjusting her wrapper as eyes followed, curious eyes. Polite judgment. Each step down the aisle felt heavier, though the distance was short. She told herself a story to survive. He is nervous, weddings are stressful, maybe he protects you. Mothers rewrite pain into something manageable. At the back she found an empty seat near the doors, light framing her softly. She sat again, back straight, chin level, silent. From there she saw him clearer than he saw her. How quickly confidence returned to him. Something shifted inside her, recognition. The boy she raised would never speak that way in private, but the man at the altar feared perception more than intimacy. She did not cry. If humiliation meant to shrink her, she would not shrink. She thought about leaving but stayed. Leaving would draw attention. Love sometimes swallows discomfort. The day was not about her. From the back she sensed the air change. Amara stepped forward, the microphone lifted. She didn't hear every word, but she heard enough. If your mother isn't important enough. The sentence reached her. For the first time she understood this was not about seating. It was about value. When the ring struck the stone, the sound traveled to her feet like an echo. She closed her eyes briefly, not in shame but sorrow, because she understood what her son did not. Silence can protect pride, but it can also expose it. She had stayed silent when he told her to stand, silent when guests stared, silent when she moved, believing silence preserved his dignity. But to Amara that silence looked like acceptance, like permission, like a lifetime of stepping aside. Mama Tund never wanted to embarrass her son. She only wanted his happiness. She never knew the front row carried such meaning, never knew her presence threatened his image, never knew love held silent at the wrong moment could hurt to witness. And as the wedding unraveled before vows were spoken, her quiet obedience became something else in the bride's eyes, because what hurt Amara most was not the command the groom whispered, but the silence from the woman who taught him how to stand. After she called off the wedding, the backlash came fast. It didn't wait for her to take off the dress. It didn't wait for her to step outside the cathedral doors. It followed her like smoke, quiet at first, then thicker, then suffocating. By the time Amara reached the reception hallway, she could already feel judgment crawling through the crowd, passing mouth to mouth like a rumor that feeds itself. People didn't even need the full story. In Nigerian society, the moment a woman disrupts a ceremony, she becomes the ceremony's headline. They stared as if she had slapped tradition itself. She's proud. Too dramatic. Such disrespect. Over a seat? A bridesmaid tried to pull her aside, gentle hand, panicked face. Someone's auntie hissed her name like a warning. A cousin she barely knew looked at her with that special disappointment reserved for women who refuse to be small. Even some of Amara's own family looked shaken, not because they disagreed, but because they could already hear the sentences people would repeat for years. She embarrassed everyone. She wasted money. She broke a man in public. But Amara's hands didn't shake. Her chest was tight. Grief, adrenaline, the sudden death of a future she'd been building. Yet beneath it sat something steadier than fear, clarity. Because while everyone else thought they'd watched a bride throw a tantrum, Amara knew what she'd actually witnessed. A character reveal. And once you see someone clearly, you can't unsee it. Outside, the sky was bright and cruelly normal. Cars were parked neatly. Decorations waited for a celebration that would never arrive. Reception staff stood frozen, unsure whether to keep setting up or begin dismantling a dream. Amara's mother reached her first, gripping her arm gently but firmly like she needed to confirm her daughter was real. "Amara, what did you do?" She whispered, not accusation, alarm. Amara met her eyes. "I saved myself." Her father arrived seconds later, composed in public but strained at the edges. He glanced toward the cathedral doors where voices were rising. He didn't ask if she was sure. He simply weighed her strength with his eyes. "What happened?" he asked quietly. Amara inhaled once. She could have said, "He disrespected his mother." She could have said, "He humiliated her." She could have said, "He told her to move." But those sentences were too small for the truth. So she said the only thing that mattered. "I saw what kind of man I was about to marry." Behind them, the noise swelled. Guests poured out in clusters of lace and suits, moving like flocks. Phones appeared. Some people pretended not to stare while staring harder than anyone. An auntie from Tun's side, gold earrings, unforgiving face, marched toward Amara with the righteous energy of someone who worshipped tradition like a god. "Are you mad?" she snapped, voice sharp enough to slice. "Do you know what you've done? You've disgraced us, over a seat." Over a seat. That was the lie everyone wanted to hold on to, because if it was just a seat, then Amara was unreasonable, and no one would have to confront the uglier truth. Amara didn't blink. "It wasn't about a seat," she said calmly. The auntie hesitated, thrown off by the lack of panic. "You people like drama," she scoffed. "You modern girls, you think you can shame a man and still be respected?" Amara almost smiled. Not because it was funny, but because the script was predictable. Women accused of pride for refusing humiliation. Men protected by the excuse of pressure. She stepped closer, just enough to make the auntie listen. "I didn't shame him," Amara said. "He showed himself." The auntie opened her mouth again, but someone tugged her back. The crowd thickened, the air heavy with opinions. Amara studied faces, some angry, some entertained. Some afraid because they understood the power of what she'd done. Not power over Tund, but power over a future that could have trapped her. Then she saw Mama Tend near the cathedral entrance, still composed, still holding herself like a woman trained to swallow pain without making noise. Their eyes met across the distance. In Mama Tund's gaze, Amara didn't see blame. She saw sorrow and something else, understanding. Amara's throat tightened, not for the wedding, she could mourn that later, but for that older woman who had learned silence as survival. Amara didn't blame her, but she also didn't ignore what that silence taught her in that moment. Because silence can be love, and silence can also be a warning. When the first wave of criticism loosened enough for Amara to breathe, Tund appeared. He came out of the cathedral with the stride of a man who still believed he could control the narrative. His white suit was spotless, but something in his face looked cracked. His eyes scanned the crowd, measuring the damage. When he saw Amara, he moved toward her quickly, voice urgent, hands open like he was offering reason. "Amara, please, let's talk." Amara didn't step back. "Talk," she said. He lowered his voice, trying to sound calm, trying to sound like the victim of misunderstanding. "You embarrassed me," he said first, because pride always speaks before love. Amara's eyes narrowed. He caught himself too late and tried to recover. "No, listen, you don't understand. I was just managing things. It's my wedding day. There are people, there's perception. My mother would have been uncomfortable there." Amara stared at him. "You told her to stand up," she said. "In front of everyone." He shook his head quickly. "I didn't mean it like that. She doesn't belong in that front row with." He stopped, searching for a word that wouldn't sound ugly. "With them, with your wife's family, with people who judge." Even unspoken, it hung between them. Amara's voice stayed steady, but her eyes hardened. "You didn't protect her," she said. "You protected yourself." Tund's jaw clenched. "I was protecting my image," he insisted, as if the sentence could justify itself. That was the moment something in Amara went perfectly still, not because he said it, but because he believed it. He believed his image deserved guarding, even at the cost of his mother's dignity. He believed how he looked mattered more than who he was. And Amara saw the future with terrifying clarity. If a man can make his mother small in public, he can make his wife smaller in private. It wouldn't start with shouting. It would start with instructions. Don't wear that. Don't say that. Don't sit there. Not here. And one day, when she pushed back, it would become, "You embarrassed me." A threat dressed as a complaint. Amara didn't raise her voice. She didn't insult him. She didn't need to. Truth was sharper than anger. "This isn't about a seat," she said. Tund looked frustrated, like she was refusing to understand something simple. "Then what is it about?" he demanded. Amara held his gaze and spoke with no drama, no theatrics, just clean reality. "It's about who you are when nobody is clapping." Tund's eyes flickered, pride scrambling for ground. "You're making this too big," he said, voice tightening. "It was just protocol." Amara exhaled slowly. "No," she said, soft but unmovable. "It was your character." The crowd around them quieted, listening. Even the aunties paused, sensing something heavier than gossip unfolding. Tund stepped closer, voice dropping. "I love you," he said, as if love could erase what he'd done. "You know I love you." Amara's expression didn't change. "I believe you," she said. "But love without respect becomes control." He looked at her like she'd slapped him with words. She continued, calm and steady. "I watched you tell the woman who gave you life to stand up and move like she was something shameful. And you didn't flinch. You didn't hesitate. You didn't consider how it would cut her." Tund's face twisted. "You're acting like I beat her," he snapped. Amara's eyes sharpened. "You didn't have to," she replied. "You did something worse. You made her disappear." He tried again, desperate now. "I was thinking about the people there, Amara. You know how they are." "They judge, Amara interrupted him, quiet and lethal. "And you decided your mother should pay the price." His shoulders tensed as he reached for his last excuse. "It's complicated," he said. Amara nodded once. "Yes," she said. "It is." Then she asked the question that ended everything, not with shouting, not with tears, but with a simple truth that shattered every excuse he'd built. "But what image," Amara said, voice steady as stone, "is worth more than the woman who gave birth to you?" The wedding was officially canceled, not with an announcement, not with a dramatic speech, but the way storms cancel plans, by changing the air so completely that everyone understands there is no going back. At first, people lingered. Nigerian weddings don't end easily. Too much money, too much pride. Too many aunties who believe anything can be fixed if you smile hard enough. But the cathedral had shifted. The music never restarted. The pastor stood frozen near the altar, Bible still open, scanning faces of families who suddenly didn't recognize one another. The choir sat with folded hands, unsure whether to sing or pray. The white roses looked almost insulting now, dressed for joy in a room turned quiet grief. Guests began to stand, not all at once, but one by one, then in small groups, like people leaving a tragedy because they don't know where else to put their eyes. Heels clicked softly on stone. Wrappers swayed. Suit jackets slid back into place as men tried to reclaim dignity that wasn't theirs to hold. Conversation stayed in whispers. "I can't believe it. This is shame. May God help them." Phones tucked away, then pulled out, then hidden again. Everyone pretending they weren't collecting a story they would retell for years. Outside, drivers started engines and the parking lot filled with quiet movement. Coordinators stood beside stacked gift boxes, stunned, while waiters stared at trays like they were holding food for ghosts. Tund stayed at the altar. At first he looked like a man waiting for someone to correct a mistake, convinced the right words could smooth it over. He stared down the aisle as if Amara might return, breathless with regret. But the aisle remained empty. The ring still lay on the stone floor, catching light with cruel persistence, as if the building itself refused to hide the truth. His white suit remained spotless, no wine, no dirt, no sweat, yet something else had stained him, something money couldn't dry clean. In Nigerian society, image isn't what you wear. It's what people say when you leave the room. Today they would not remember his suit. They would remember his whisper, "Get up. Not here." They would remember his mother walking alone, and the bride refusing to accept humiliation as love. He stood very still as the last guests filed out, the cathedral growing larger as silence climbed into the high ceiling like a verdict. His groomsmen didn't know what to do. One stepped forward, then stopped. Another pretended to check his phone, because friendship becomes awkward when truth turns ugly in public. Tund watched Amara's family leave. Her father walked calmly, head high. Her mother kept close to her daughter. Amara didn't look back once. That hurt more than the ring on the floor. He could fight rumors, argue words, invent explanations, but he couldn't argue with a woman who had already decided she deserved better. Near the doors, Mama Tund remained. She stayed longer than anyone, not to be seen, but because she had no habit of running from pain. She watched the guests disappear, the choir pack up, the pastor close his Bible with a soft thud that sounded like an ending, and her son standing alone where vows should have been spoken. For a moment she didn't move. Her face composed, eyes heavy, not anger, not disappointment, something deeper. A mother mourns what happened, what could have been, and the distance between the child she remembers and the man he became. She walked slowly up the aisle meant for celebration, lace still neat, posture dignified but lonely in the emptiness. When she reached the front, she didn't stand beside him, didn't touch him, didn't scold him. She looked at him the way she had when he was a boy hiding behind excuses. "Tund," she said quietly. He flinched. "Ma." She didn't ask why. She already knew, in shorter calls, rarer visits, growing pride and shrinking patience. She noticed the ring on the floor, then met his eyes. "My son," she said steady. "I came because I was proud." His eyes burned, and for the first time he looked like a child caught in truth. She didn't wait for apology or demand justice. She nodded once, confirming what she had already accepted, then turned and walked out. She was the last to leave. The doors closed with a heavy echo that rolled through the empty cathedral like a final sentence. Tund remained at the altar, white suit still clean, but honor gone. Outside, the world moved on quickly. Vendors sold food. Traffic honked. Lagos did what Lagos always does. It swallowed stories and turned them into lessons. Amara never came back, not because she didn't love him, but because she loved herself enough not to marry a man ashamed of where he came from. Some men are ashamed of where they come from, but the greatest shame is forgetting who carried you there. The words settle like dust inside a cathedral already emptied of applause. Outside, the heavy wooden doors open and Mama Tund steps into the Lagos sunlight. The brightness asks no questions and passes no judgment. It simply reveals. The deep blue of her lace catches the light first, steady and dignified, her gel perfectly balanced without a fold out of place. The composure she wore inside, she wears now. Cars pull away, guests disperse in clusters of whispered opinions, and somewhere in the distance, a vendor calls to passing traffic as life continues as if vows were never interrupted. She pauses at the top of the cathedral steps. Not because she is unsure, but because she remembers. A small boy gripping her fingers crossing busy streets. Nights counting coins under weak lantern light. Hunger she never spoke of and dreams she fed instead. Prayers that her son would rise high enough to never feel the weight she carried. He rose, higher than she ever had. But somewhere in the climb he confused altitude with identity. Mama Tund inhales slowly, warm air filling her chest. There are no tears. They would be easy, expected, but she has never performed pain for comfort. Her face remains calm, not untouched, not unhurt, just practiced. The sun softens the lines carved by years of endurance. She adjusts her wrapper gently, a familiar motion, and walks down the steps alone. Behind her, inside the vast cathedral, a white suit stands in silence, pride still polished, honor gone. Ahead, the city moves without ceremony. Danfo buses honk, heels strike pavement, a child laughs nearby. Life goes on, and so does she, because she has always known how to carry what others cannot see. She does not cry because she's used to sacrificing in silence.